Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by 4for4 Bets. Ryan Noonan, joined here as always by Connor Allen, continuing our divisional preview series. We got it kicked off last week with the NFC East. Find that on our 4for4 Bets YouTube channel, wherever you listen to podcasts. Look for Move the Line, subscribe, rate and review, thumbs up, all that stuff. Joining me here as always today for the NFC South, Connor Allen. What's up, bud?
Yeah, not much. Another kind of bad division here. We'll see how it goes. I mean, I love doing these because I just keep diving in, digging in more, and finding bets that I like, and I think that's kind of the point. But I'm excited to talk about. Well, I'm not excited to talk about some of these teams, but I think I'm excited to talk about the bets that came from diving in.
Okay, yeah. Last week you bets on 3 of the 4 teams. This one's a harder. Like, this is a division that I think was. I don't know that it's made a ton of changes in terms of like our overall thought of the division, right? Someone's going to win it. Someone's going to make a playoff run and appearance because of it. It's probably not a 2 playoff team division, but you never know in the world of football. But like, do we have a contender, right? We struggled last week where the NFC East was, flawed. I think we both think the Eagles are a good team. Cowboys, solid, probably a playoff team. Are they an actual contender? Whereas the other 2 teams we think we have some questions about. I struggle to think that we have a contender in this division, but we can get to that and figure that out too. Again, if you want to go ahead and check that out, you can go back and listen to that one too. And again, we're going to continue the series all the way up until basically week 1. We'll probably have, some sort of preview show, kind of wrap it up, maybe some season-long props before week 1 kicks off. But we're grinding down, man. We are under 50 days into before we get into that week 1 game, that Thursday night kickoff game, and cannot wait. So let's jump into it. Waste no time. We'll jump right in here. Again, challenging division. Overall, the NFC South, in terms of what the conference is playing schedule-wise, they face the NFC East, and they also face the AFC West. And we'll start with the Falcons. The Falcons are the favorites here. They are 30-1 to win the Super Bowl. You can find that on DraftKings. They are 13-1 to win the AFC and go to the Super Bowl. Minus 120 is the price for them to win this division. It's the best number there on DraftKings. The win total here is at 9.5, juiced to the over. Busy offseason, obviously. I'll start at the beginning. Obviously, moving on from Arthur Smith, replaced with Raheem Morris, who coached his face off last year, really, with the Rams. Like, we had no expectations. I loved the Rams under last year, partially because the defense was just on paper terrible, like no talent. Really, it was Aaron Donald and a bunch of dudes. Raheem Morris made them competitive. That was a playoff team, deservedly so, and he earned himself another shot at the top spot here as a head coach. They were kind of a trendy sleeper last year. Sharp Clark, our guy last year, was on them big time, was deep in Falcons bets. Train really never left the station. It was kind of tied and hitched to Desmond Ridder, right? And that was kind of the problem. They gave the bag to a 36-year-old Kirk Cousins, 4 years, $180 million, fresh off of a torn Achilles. I don't think we have a ton of concerns there, but we'll see. I mean, I think that was a risk worth taking. And then the draft rolls around and they make the Michael Penix Jr. selection. And like, especially at 8th overall, Connor, I mean, we touched on it, we're trying to talk bets related, but again, now we can touch, instead of just how that plays out in bets, we can talk about maybe from a team building standpoint. Like, this team has a ton of needs and they draft a quarterback. And again, if you don't have an answer at quarterback and you don't have an answer anywhere, maybe they have concerns about the Achilles, who knows? But again, once again, one of the easiest schedules in the league, partially because they play 6 games in the division against these other teams that we're going to get to. But are they real contenders, or are they just kind of a team that we think can probably win this division?
Well, they also had one of the easiest schedules last year, and that didn't turn out too well. But obviously, they made massive changes here. I think that it's really tough to comprehend the level of change we're going to see from this offense, going from Arthur Smith, Desmond Ridder, not using Drake London and Kyle Pitts all that much, now to Kirk Cousins. They added Darnell Mooney, they added Rondale Moore, they added their offense should be very fun. I mean, there's still some questions on the defense, I would say. Justin Edwards has the Falcons as a second-ranked offensive line. So it's like, I have no questions about the offense. The offense has to be good. It should be good. The defense is – I still cannot believe that they did not take Liatu Latu. They lost Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree, didn't add anything else. They are literally relying on Raheem Morris to do exactly what he did last year, but they don't have Aaron Donald. Like the Rams, like that's kind of how they function. It was basically Aaron Donald and everyone else stepped up. They made the most out of nothing. Whereas now, like, I mean, they have Jesse Bates, who's the second ranked safety by PFF, AJ Terrell, who is, I guess, 24th out of 127 corners, and David Onyemata, who's a good interior player. I mean, the rest of the roster is garbage. Like, defense is horrible. And so, like, this could legit be one of the worst defenses in the league, which could be fun, but I think it creates some, like, fragility with this team in some senses because they're going to lose some games they shouldn't just because their defense is so bad. And their offense might be able to carry them against good teams, but maybe not. Like, we just don't know that for sure. So initially, before I kind of dug into this, I was pretty confident the Falcons win the division is a good bet. Maybe it still is, but I think that there's a little bit more downside if the Raheem Morris magic turning around the Rams isn't a thing. And so, they're favored in 13 of 17 games. So the market expects them to be really good, but
dang, it's crazy. But yeah,
yeah. So I don't know what to do with them, to be honest. For me, it's kind of like a stay away. Maybe alt overs if you believe in them. I don't know if I'm ready to take alt unders because I think their offense can keep them in like basically any game.
It's interesting because I had the same takeaway, right? My perception going into breaking down the division was that this is the best team. And I don't know that I'm not still there, but like, there's just so many questions and it's thin, right? Like, yeah, they went out and added, Moody and Rondell to add to the wide receiver room, but like the depth behind it is nothing. Yes, ideally you can get more out of Kyle Pitts. Ideally you can be smarter and maximize Drake London, who I think we both believe is skilled. I know you've made some really nice future bets on Drake London to hit some of those ceiling outcomes at just insane prices, right? That's, I think, mostly price-driven plays because they were way off market early. Oh, yeah. But like, yeah, the defense is it's like Jimmy Lake and Raheem Morris have to do what Morris did in LA again, like you said. Like, that's a big ask. Like, AJ Terrell is solid, but like he's in the last year of his deal. Like, he's playing for a contract. They're shifting to a base 3-4, as you mentioned. Like, that's really tough. Like, their best pass rushers. This is why the Latu thing seems to like scream at us still. Their best pass rushers are interior defensive linemen. And like one of them is Grady Jarrett, and he's coming off of a November ACL tear. But you need him to like come back and be Grady Jarrett again. And he's a little bit older. So like they took some swings on day 2 in the draft on some edge rushers. But like this team needs those guys to hit. The safety room is okay. The linebacker room is okay, but those aren't really difference making positions in terms of, defense. Like you need some corners that can lock it down. You need some pass rush. And like, yeah, some of the like stats from David Onyemata are really nice, like better than like his baseline underlying stats. I think are really encouraging, but you just don't see teams win that way very much. Now, again, that's what the Rams did for the most part with Aaron Donald winning, from the interior versus the perimeter. But man, like you throw Leatu Latu in this team and all of a sudden it feels like you have at least someone that you can get bankable amount of pressures and change the dynamic and the calculus of how the team plays defense. And it's a big ask. So there's a lot of optimism around Zach Robinson coming in as the OC as well. I understand it. And like, we've seen this is like anyone that's got coffee for Sean McVay in the last handful of years is there's optimism. And it's also like by proxy, like it's Arthur Smith is out, right? Like he did such a poor job and like intentionally, deliberately feeling like he wanted to not maximize the talent he had on the roster. This team has used a ton of draft capital in the last couple of years. You talked about like Justin's offensive line rankings. There's a lot of good offensive lineman continuity, and these guys are signed through next year as well. So like they'll continue to be better. You'll see more 11 personnel because that's really like the Sean McVay thing. Atlanta ran by far the fewest 11 personnel snaps last year. And when they did, they ran out of it 55% of the time, which is like no other team ran out of 11 personnel more than 40% of the time. So even when the Falcons spread it out last year and put 3 receivers on the field, they ran the ball at an elite clip. So great offensive line, Bijan Robinson, all those things. Like there's some ceiling here, but it's thin. And I have concerns. I don't know how to bet the team. So I'm kind of with you. Like it feels like maybe alts, minus 120 to win the division when there's so many questions is definitely not the look. They feel like definitely the most likely team to do so, but I don't know. I mean, the Penix thing is really, really questionable. And now that we're here, like, it's going to play itself out. This team needed something different with the 8th pick, right? Like Roma Dunze, like just add some depth to the just kind of going all in with those guys. Give him Rome. Like if you just decided you didn't want to go with Latu, like trade back, use free agent money in a different way. If you like Penix, don't give Cousins the bag. I don't know. It's just so many top down problems to here that are troubling and going to kind of play themselves out this year, I think.
Yeah, and I totally agree with all that. If you do want to make bets here, I'm actually driving over to DraftKings today at some point to make a little fun alternate over player parlay just for, again, just for fun. But I do think Drake London plus 400 to have 1,250 receiving yards. It's kind of a good look. I think that's kind of fun. I mean, he has worse odds or similar odds than Christian Kirk, like George Pickens is plus 350. I don't know. He's similar odds to them. Like he's in the Zay Flowers range right now. And I think that he's being a little bit undervalued there. So I kind of like that. And then ways to bet on Bijan Robinson just being awesome. I think FanDuel released some better ones. DraftKings only has 1,000 or 1,500 rushing yards. 1,500 rushing yards is steep. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're going to pass the ball plenty. Again, there's going to be game script concerns. I think if you could bet like all-purpose yards, I think that would be a great bet with Bijan Robinson. Nonstop talk about using him in like a Christian McCaffrey role. So, yeah, I think that's probably my favorite ways to bet on the Falcons right now is just like player props.
Yeah. Schedule a little tricky to start too, right? Like it gets easy and overall it's super easy, but Pittsburgh game's kind of a toss up, right? We're not sure what we think of Pittsburgh anyway. And you get, Philly, Kansas City, and then you get into the division. So like it could be 1-2, 0-3, and it gets a little bit wonky there all of a sudden. Again, obviously it softens up, but there are better ways to bet the Falcons. I think if you like them, you might get a better number, say October 1.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, like buying points of the season. Like you can almost project that out. Like Pitt, Philly, and Kansas City in the first 3 weeks, as you just mentioned, there's a good chance that they're 1-2. I mean, they could very easily be 0-3. They're like 2.5 point favorites in week 1 against the Steelers. Like them losing would not be all that surprising. So if you do like Atlanta, or I think it just could be a good bet regardless, like just kind of blindly forgetting those first 3 games and then betting them to win the division, you'll almost certainly get a better price than what you get now.
1,000%. You probably get to at least even, or you get some plus money depending on how someone else in the division starts. So, all right, next we'll go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, interesting. You have, it's a second team in the division, a playoff team last year. But our Super Bowl odds are 90-1. 90-1 on Caesars is the best price. 35 to win the conference. You can find that either on DraftKings or Caesars as well. Plus 330 to win the division. Also best price on Caesars. Kind of in between. The win total has like moved around a little bit. There are 7.5s juice to the over, 8.5 minus 155. So, definitely have to shop around depending on what your thoughts there were. Again, I was stunned what we saw last year with Tampa Bay. I had such little expectations there. It's in a unique shift, right? They were pivoting from the post Tom Brady era. They did a good job, like punting contracts off so that they weren't like just being the Saints, basically, which is, I don't know how the Saints continue to do this and moving things around, just this like shell game of cash and dead money. And they had a ton of dead money in the books. They were going to Baker Mayfield, a ton of questions. And again, like some of the concerns I had in terms of them being super thin did play out. Like they were thin. It didn't really like super matter because we got more from Baker than I thought we ever thought. He did a good job of protecting the football. He drastically improved his pressure to sack rate. Like, dude, just 8 sacks at an insane clip anytime he felt pressure, and he made improvements. Now, they weren't really consistent, and this will play itself out when we get to the Panthers too. Like, they weren't really efficient. It was a lot of like they were the worst team in the league on first and second down. It was a crap ton of deep balls, third down, Mike Evans making plays, Baker not turning it over, and those big plays work for them. That is concerning in terms of like stability. But now Dave Canellis is gone. Kind of a new system there, new things. Still concerns on the Bucs, Connor. What do you think here?
Yeah, I want to be a little bit lower than market on the Bucks. There's still an 8.5 win total at Caesars right now. I think the under there, even at -155, is pretty strong.
Yeah.
Offensive line, I think, got a little bit better. Justin Edwards has him ranked 14th. They added Graham Barton in the first round. But a couple things. I think the loss of Dave Canales is massive. I think that is just, huge for this offense. He's, spent time essentially resurrecting Baker Mayfield, who we saw struggle in Cleveland. We saw struggle in Carolina. Like, he's been pretty bad his entire career and then has one good season. And everyone's like, okay, well, Baker Mayfield's good, or, this offense will be fine. I'm not sold yet, to be honest. And so I think you throw in a new offensive coordinator that maybe doesn't maximize his skills. I'm a little bit worried in the offense. The defense last year finished 18th in EPA, 5th against the run. 20 seconds against the pass, though. Lost Shaq Barrett, Devin White, and Carlton Davis without really adding anyone. So,
yep.
I mean, they're thin. They're not necessarily a good defense on paper. I think that, their coach is able to maximize the ability to, like, kind of get the most out of their players in terms of, like, defensively. So I don't think they're going to be, like, horrible, but I could see them being, kind of in that early 20s of EPA and, like, kind of efficiency there. So I think there's just, like, so much downside here. If the offensive shift from, Canales to Cohen doesn't work out, no way this team's winning 9 games. If the defense is really, really bad, which is, again, very possible, you need Baker Mayfield to climb back into games. I mean, that's like a ridiculous note. Think about this like a year ago, 2 years ago, if we were saying that, like, your single point of failure is Baker Mayfield, like, the win total should be like 4.5, 5.5. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I don't know, but what's interesting is the market has them favored in 8 games, and they play some bad teams. Panthers twice, Raiders, Commanders, Broncos, Giants. Like, I mean, some of the worst teams in the league. So the schedule doesn't benefit them a little bit in terms of who they play, but I don't think that they're, like, materially better than a lot of those teams, unfortunately, at this point. So, like, yes, they're easy games, but I don't think that they're, like, easy wins, I guess, if that makes sense. So I think under 8.5 is a solid look, to be honest.
I agree. I mean, laying that much juice for a season-long bet is a little bit of a tough pill to swallow, but I agree with you. Like, it feels high. Like, it feels for them to run back 8.5 last year when things went as well as they did, like exceeding expectations. Like, again, the concerns with all these teams are taking really hard stances against any of the teams that we're going to talk about today is like, oh, the division. Like, there's just not, like, the schedule. Like, it's just so hard to feel like there's any of these teams are good or any of these teams can, like, completely bottom out. I mean, maybe we can get there, but they need a lot to go well again. You mentioned some of the, like, defensive moves. They didn't really replace those guys. They need some of the young guys to kind of step up. All right, Kalijah Cansey, Diaby, who kind of emerged late in the season last year, was a later round pick for them and started to play well. They need him to be really good. I'm interested in Chris Broswell, their second round edge that they got from Alabama. I still think his current price for defensive rookie of the year is really interesting because, like, edge rushers are winning that award more and more if he's going to be in there. And there's a guy that just didn't have, like, prolific college numbers, but he was buried behind, Will Anderson and, like, just a lot of depth, on that team and not necessarily, like, a guy that couldn't produce. So I think he's pretty interesting. It's a below average mix of corners. They've just Carlton Davis left, and they're looking for the interior guys that were there that replaced him when he was injured last year to just kind of step in and be full-time guys. They just couldn't run the football. I think that's a really aggressive. I think maybe we're off market in terms of where we're rating the Bucs offensive line to, because I think that's probably pretty good in terms of, like, where they are if you were to look at PFF or some other things. So I think that's an upside thing there too. I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll get to some of the stuff when we get to Canales, when we get to the Panther stuff, but it's a first place schedule too, right? Like, it grades out easier overall because of the division games, but the unique 3 are Detroit, Baltimore, San Francisco. And they kind of come in the middle of the schedule, and they have the wrong side of the rest advantage in all those spots. It lightens up significantly after their week 11 bye, but, like, middle of the season is a pretty tough run there. So again, we're banking on an insane amount of third down efficiency. Maybe the Cohen thing works. His passing game coordinator, who's coming with him, has spent a lot of time he was with Mike McDaniel last year in Miami. So we'll probably see more pre-snap motion. We'll see some more shifting, some things that they didn't do really well or at all last year. Just 8.5 seems really, really high. Even 7.5 at plus money feels like kind of the upside of this team. So definitely don't think they're going back to the playoffs. But again, I thought they were terrible last year and they exceeded expectations. It seems like giving the bag to Baker was the problem. Again, it wasn't a long-term deal, but like, I don't know. It feels like you almost have to. It's such the quarterback position, man. Like, what are you going to do if you don't have one? And he showed a pulse last year, first overall pick. Like the pedigree's there. You have to kind of make a choice.
Yeah, being stuck in quarterback purgatory just doesn't really leave you with a whole lot of options. So especially after they barely made the playoffs, actually, won a game. I mean, they dominated the Eagles. So that was
dominated the
crazy.
Eagles.
I mean, that was
crazy.
Just like, it was a drubbing. And then we have Jeff here adding Younghoe Koo is going to be great for Atlanta this year. Of course, Jeff with the kicker take. He probably will be great. So fantasy league props, I'm sure you'll be betting on him, Jeff. I'm sure he's going to score a lot of points.
Never without a kicker take. Absolutely love it. So, all right, next is the Saints. Saints are 100-1 to win the Super Bowl. DraftKings or Caesars. DraftKings has the best price for the conference at 45. They are plus 4.25 to win this division. Also on Caesars, 7.5 is the win total. It is slightly juiced to the over. The Saints are tough to me. Like, what are the Saints? What is the Saints' identity? Like, what is their who are they? I don't know the answers to these questions. I think and it's such a remedial way to do this, and I don't think it's the right way to do it. It's not, I think, what our content is. But like, if you want to basically boil down a team's evaluation simply by looking at the head coach and quarterback duo, you kind of get stalled on the Saints. Derek Carr, Dennis Allen are not enough in terms of what you want to be in terms of a playoff team, legitimate contender, all those things. Thoughts on the Saints?
Yeah, it's an interesting team because I think that I know some sharp people bet on them to win the division and have considered the Saints just, kind of leaning into uncertainty and having them as the second best team. Their defense was strong last year, top 5 in EPA, added Chase Young and Willie Gay. I think that Dennis Allen's a good defensive coach. My question is more related to the offense and like what we see change here. They brought in Clint Kubiak, an offensive coordinator, which I think is a big upgrade from Pete Carmichael. I think a lot of it has to do with the motion. Like they were one of the lowest, I think it was 31st in pre-snap motion. And then Clint Kubiak, I think, is going to bring in a breath of fresh air on that end and bring in a lot of pre-snap motion. Now, the issue is the offensive line. Literally, this morning, maybe yesterday, it was Ryan Ramczyk announced out for the season. And Justin Edwards already had them ranked as like one of the worst offensive lines in the league. So I'm not confident because you have to scheme around that with Derek Carr, and they have some weapons. I mean, obviously Chris Olave is good. Alvin Kamara is a useful pass catcher, but not having an offensive line that you can rely on, I think it's not a great way to start, especially when you have Derek Carr as your quarterback. So for me, it's one of those things where if I felt good at all about the offensive line, or if the offensive line is good, like I think the Saints could probably win the division if they run well. But I think that's a massive if. But in their schedule is brutal to start. Weeks 2 through 5, Dallas, Philly, Atlanta, and Kansas City. Yeah. So again, another team that like if you want to bet them to win the division, I don't think they're going to win any of those games. I mean, if you really feel strongly, I feel like it could be a good entry point if you want to get involved in some Saints stuff.
Well, part of the interesting part of using that and jumping into the market here is that the fear of having another team run away and hide is probably lower than any other division in the league, right? Unless you think that's the Falcons, but even that, we touched on the Falcons, their opening schedule is the more difficult part of their schedule too. So like the price is going to probably improve because I'm kind of with you, like 4.25, not bad. If you have questions with where the Falcons are and you think the Bucs come back to earth a little bit, the Saints seem like the team that they can maybe take a step. They just continue to tread water. Like the just hard to get out of the salary cap hell that they're in. Like, cause they could just never make any real splashy moves. They just have to continue to restructure, save that money. Like they can't really go out. They have to hit in the draft. They did a couple times in the last few years, and that's helped keep Mickey Loomis employed. But that's really the only way this team can continue to improve. So the Kubiak thing, is interesting. Maybe, a lot of like, he's been tied. Obviously, his dad was a coach for a long time. Tad, played in the league. He's been like good offense adjacent for a while, but he's never really had. This is kind of his first time getting full play calling duties. Like he's taken over in spots. He took over in Minnesota briefly, took over in Denver for Nathaniel Hackett. This is the first time I think he really gets to put his stamp on it. Interested to see what he got from his time with the Niners last year. And I think he made good points. It'll change in terms of like what Carmichael did was a little bit more like he's kind of calling offense like he still had Drew Brees at quarterback, which is not what he has. But and Allen is a good coach, as you said, defensively, but continues to get more out of the team than I think we would expect. But I mean, historically, one of the more underwhelming. He's been a head coach for a while, right? He had a stint with the Raiders. He's 24-46 as a head coach. His teams have never gone over their win total. They just stall out. It's just a guy that you feel like maybe is a little out over his skis in terms of, controlling and leading a room. Kind of lost the room a little bit last year where like Jameis de-gaffed like against the Falcons and like just said, yeah, you know what? We're giving the ball to the running back. We're getting a touchdown here instead of taking a knee. Like, they just, again, I want to make more of that situation. That's probably on Jameis, but it's just in terms of like, will that have happened with Sean Payton? I don't know. I don't know that happens with a different head coach. So I don't know. In a lot of ways, they were the bizarro Bucks in terms of efficiency. They were really good on early downs, completely incompetent on third, fourth down. They could not really get big plays. Olave is I think a guy that we think has a ton of upside, but kind of feels disappointing with what he's done so far because the quarterback hasn't got it there and got it together either. So yeah, I don't love the team, but I feel like 4-1 in change is maybe an interesting bet. But I think the point of entry in the market, I think matters too. So yeah, you probably maybe get 5.5 or 6 again, when we get into October, because they get off to a slow start. So it's kind of where I'm in the States, just a lot of treading water, but because no one else is running away, maybe there's a shot here.
Yeah, this is interesting. Scott D brings up least liked head coach in the league per player survey. I guess that's not that surprising. I don't know. I thought some people hated some other coaches last year. It seemed like I thought Fangio is probably if they're including other like offensive coordinator, defensive coordinators, like people hated him last year. So
yeah, it was rough.
Yeah, we'll see.
24-46. It's really rough, right? It's really you're below 40%. And I know obviously the bad Raiders run is bringing that down, but
that's impressively bad.
It's impressively bad to stay employed, right? When you think of like dudes are getting chopped in year one nowadays, like there's to have that leash and be able to stay on. And I think this is it, right? Like I think they have to make the playoffs probably here. It's hard to run him back again if they're just 7-10 again or something that just doesn't matter. 8-9 don't make the playoffs. It just is kind of a tough run. So, but yeah, like you said, when you enter the market, it makes a ton of sense and is important to kind of watch, I think, throughout this division. All right. Lastly, the Carolina Panthers, 300-1 to win the Super Bowl. They are 120-1 to win the conference, 12-1 to win the division, win total 5.5. I mean, before we jump into the 2024 season, I think we have to briefly touch on how poorly things went in 2023. I mean, on the field alone, so just touch on the field. It's one of the worst offensive teams in the history of the game when you adjust for era. It is, as I was just talking about, so unusual for a first-year head coach to get canned in the middle of his first season. Frank Reich didn't make it to December. Number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young, sacked 62 times. It's the 6th most ever. They gained 9.1 yards per completion. That is also top 10 worst season of all time. They netted 4.1 yards per dropback. Another top 10 historically bad performance. Think about that. Per dropback, 4.1 yards. I mean, that's just, it's horrible. Really bad. It's so bad. And they won twice. They're both on last second field goals. At no point during the season did they hold a fourth quarter lead. Now that alone is bad. When you hold it up to the light and see what it cost to acquire the pick, what else happened, right? They basically have propelled the Texans and the Bears to be 2 of the most exciting teams in terms of just like franchise optimism over the next 5 years, because we know we felt really good about our contacts heading into that draft. CJ Stroud is what they wanted to do. At some point, it got derailed, and it was Bryce Young, whether they wanted to trade up to 2 to get CJ Stroud or they want to take CJ Stroud at 1. It shifted and it ended up being Bryce Young. CJ Stroud goes on and has a historically great rookie season, offensive rookie of the year, all those things. And now, like DJ Moore, the picks they got, Roma Dunze and Caleb Williams to the Bears, more second-round picks, just awful for what's going on there. And again, what they gave him around him to protect him was really bad. So, like, what would CJ Stroud have done in that situation? We'll never know. But you can't give up on a quarterback after 1 year, especially the number 1 overall pick. But it got better. Still not good, though, Connor.
It's not like Nico Collins and Tank Dell were like household names until last year. Like, I mean, they were just some jabronis. Like, they were fine. I mean, but like, I don't know. I mean, Adam Thielen had a good season last year. They added Deontay Johnson, which I think is going to be massive. I think Deontay is going to have a big year. Xavier Legette, I think, is a great like gadget player. Like, I think we took an under on him initially at 700 receiving yards.
So bad.
Yeah, like I don't really believe in him as like a true wideout. I just think they're going to use him in a lot of different ways around the line, which could help from like a holistic scheme standpoint. I think this offensive line is ranked 23rd by Justin Edwards. They had 12 different starters last year on the offensive line, second most in the NFL. I don't know. The defense, I want to defer to you because they lost like 6 guys, but they also added like 6 guys, but none of them really seem to be difference makers. Like, they lost a bunch of guys who, I mean, I guess Brian Burns, that's, and Frankie Louvu and Dante Jackson, like they lost some good players and they added some, again, I think good players, but I want to defer to you because you know more. Like, is this a net positive or a net negative? Like, I truly have no idea with how much turnover they had.
So I think on the field this season, probably mostly a wash. They got older. They got older and maybe a little bit worse. I don't understand that. I don't understand why, like, you take 60 cents on the dollar on Brian Burns compared to what was offered in years past. Like, I don't know why at this point you felt like you had to make that deal. Like, Jeremy Chin has a ton of talents and struggled to stay healthy and like seemed like not a fit for whatever Elijah Evero was trying to do. But like Dante Jackson, Von Bell, like they brought in, like you said, Clowney's there, DJ Wonnum from Minnesota. They brought in, Josie Jewell from Denver. They replaced guys, Jordan Fuller at safety, like, still going to be fine. But overall, just Frankie Louvu, Brian Burns are building blocks, like young, talented guys that can get pressure. They were the best pressure guys too. Like, so you still have Derek Brown, who's one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. People really like Elijah Evero. I think this defense last year kept them in games, even though they were 2-15 and, never leading, but like, it could have been way worse, I think. So they had a lot of like secondary injuries last year too. So yeah, it feels like on the whole, and just in terms of roster construction, a step back. I don't know why you would want to build around. You're basically giving money, guaranteeing money to older players that aren't making significant difference. Like, it's just Clowney. We've seen Clowney just kind of airball seasons. If things aren't going well, you might be a little bit of a front runner, right? Like, things are a little harder. You're not playing for the Ravens, one of the best teams in the league, with a great defensive mind and a team that has promise. Like, Clowney, that check's coming every 15 days. Is he like super duper motivated to take this team to the next level? Is that where he is in terms of his career? So kind of felt like a sideways / step back in terms of roster construction.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's helpful. That's kind of what I thought too, but I didn't want to speak out of turn there because, I mean, again, it's a lot of moving pieces. I feel like I can piece together
a lot of
couple
dudes,
guys, but that whole thing is interesting. Obviously, the big thing too is Dave Canales resurrected Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith in recent years. Now is arguably one of his toughest tests yet with Bryce Young and what they have going on there. So I don't know. I think it's just a team, like, I think 5.5 is about right. Maybe plus money in the under is kind of interesting. They're underdogs, and I believe every game this season right now, as it stands. Like, I don't know. I know some sharp people are on the Panthers overs at like 4.5, which again at 4.5, I mean, 5 games is not very many to win, so you can kind of luck into that. But I don't really see a whole lot of reason for optimism outside of like Dave Canales and Deontay Johnson. Like that for me, that's not enough to like take an over. So I don't know. I guess I'm kind of out on that. We added our Brandon mentioned here, Jonathan Brooks can be a good running back for them. Yeah, they're going to run the ball a ton. Dave Canales made that very clear. They are going to run the ball. They're going to establish it. I think Brooks will be good. I think he's coming off an injury. That's why he was like drafted where he was. So I think he's going to start slow. They're going to ease him in. And then probably by midseason, he's going to be their full on workhorse, I believe. So I think that would be interesting for sure. And then Jeff, we need to clear something up here in the chat. Is it even possible that someone Noonan's height can be a good QB? So to be clear, Bryce Young is shorter than both Noonan and I. Noonan is like 6'3". I'm like 6 feet. Bryce Young is very much shorter than both of us. So
taking shots, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean Jeff's he's out here. You should have if Jeff was in Chicago for the tornadoes and the lightning the other day. I mean, he would be. I don't know if he'd still be with us today. I mean, this is, it was wild, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah, Bryce Young is too small. I don't know. He just didn't have it all together. We'll see. I mean, maybe Dave Canales can work some magic. I don't think he's like totally screwed, but he was bad. Bryce Young unders were good. There was some good times last year.
Yeah. Jeff's also asking Brian Burns leaving, who's Carolina's tackle guy now. Brian Burns wasn't, edge rusher, not a big tackle guy. Shaq Thompson, one of the kind of like their main captain of the defense and was lost early in the season. He's back and they signed Josie Jewell. So like that's a solid, not spectacular interior offense or, linebacker group. Jordan Fuller probably get some box snaps at safety and be able to compile some tackles and do some stuff there. But yeah, just Josie Jewell is going to have some opportunities there as well. I want to have a conversation quickly about Canales because there's some fake sharp underlying stuff here, right? I'm concerned because I agree with you. You and I both were in the process when we were touching on coaching changes. We were concerned because this guy resurrected Geno and was tied to Baker last year. And we think that was a big thing. But again, touched on how inefficient Tampa Bay was on early downs. And think about what we had, what our struggles were in terms of the late year Seattle Russ teams. It's the same thing, right? Frustratingly inefficient on first and second downs, would run into, heavy boxes and hopefully have Russ win with moon balls on third down, right? Deep passes and taking shots down the field. Because they had Metcalf and Lockett and they can get that done. And that's kind of where Russ thrives. Now that's what Tampa Bay did, right? It was Mike Evans on third down, hero ball, and it worked. And then you hear the quotes, right? Canales was tied to Pete Carroll for 12 years, right? And there's some really good things about Pete Carroll. And then there's some just old school, establish it. We need to run the setup play action. We need to win time of possession. All the things that analytics have told us over time just aren't real. In terms of bringing you expected wins or anything like that. It just doesn't increase your chances of winning. And all the stuff from Canales is still we want to run the football. We want to control, keep our defense off the field and, set up play action. There feels like we're going to have another scenario where he's going to ask Bryce Young, who does not thrive on the deep ball, to win on third downs again because he wants to run the football. And yeah, they spent some resources on the offensive line to make it better because it could not be worse. But they just gave guys big money contracts that aren't necessarily Robert Hunt's not way above league average is a guard, but they gave him Pro Bowl guard money. That doesn't make him a Pro Bowl guard. They just gave him Pro Bowl guard money, right? So yes, he's tied to Geno's resurrections. He's tied to Russ kind of coming back a little bit in the late Seattle days and obviously tied to Baker. But the other stuff in terms of it's process results, we're making a Canales call based off of the results, or some of the process and some of the talk behind it is also is this really what it takes to win? Right? So I have concerns there in terms of what happens if Bryce Young is just not that dude that can win post snap.
Yeah, no, I'm that's some great points. I don't know. I guess everyone's assumed that he's just this super sharp guy that's just automatically going to fix Bryce.
The results have been good.
The results have been good. But yeah, I think looks like Thorne has the Panthers 24th at offensive line. Justin Edwards has them 23rd. mean, that's still a question too. Like, it's just, again, like, just because they invested the most money in the offseason in the offensive line out of any team, but that doesn't mean that their offensive line is going to be good because they just paid a lot of Jags, to be high paid players. So I don't know. I think you're almost making the case even more for under 5.5 wins. Is that where you're at right here? Is that
kind
one
of
your best bets? Yeah.
Yeah. It's still not a good roster, right? We're banking on a team that's going to run a lot of Chuba Hubbard and Miles or Sanders until they can get their hurt running back healthy. And then we need Mingo or Leggett or Thielen to emerge. Cause I do think a lot of like quick slants win that's how I think Deontay Johnson wins. And I think that's how Bryce Young wins. So I think that's going to be a good connection. Like Johnson receiving like reception overs early in the season might be a good like look, right? 4.5, 5.5. He's probably going to catch a lot of like slants for 40 yards. I mean, like 6 catches for 40 yards, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
Yeah. Not 40-yard slants. So I think those are the kind of things like they don't have a difference maker at tight ends. Like Tommy Tremble's a blocking tight ends. They took a shot on Sanders, the kid from Texas. So I just still have questions here with like talent everywhere because I do think the defense got worse. So the problem is when you're that bad, like just positive regression to the mean has to come somehow. But again, this is a team that like was 2-15. Positive regression could still be 4 wins. They didn't have a lead in the fourth quarter. It's not like they were in these toss-up games they just went in the wrong way. It's a bad football team that's just, I don't know that it's much, much better. So unless we think that Bryce Young is way better than what we saw last year. I'm not sure that either of us think that.
No, I mean, he, like, even in college, he got to throw to good players. Like, he played in a good system. Like, I don't know, it just could be one of those things that we mis-scouted him. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's just not we, but like, the NFL mis-scouted him. I don't know. Quarterback scouting is really tough. So I guess I don't fully blame him. But Scott here mentioning just waiting for season-long receptions to come out for Deontay. Yeah, that's a great look. I think plus 300 for him to have 1,000 receiving yards is fine. I mean, there's going to be some massive, like, I mean, he's going to see 10 plus targets in a couple games this year for sure. So I don't know. I think that's kind of an interesting look, especially if the offense is any better. I mean, even when it wasn't, Adam Thielen, crushed last season, and he slowly died, throughout the end of the season. Like, I just don't think he could move towards the end. Deontay's a little bit better than that.
Yeah, 6 wins is, I don't see it. Like, I think that there's, like I said, bounce back opportunities, but that could still be 4 to 5 wins. That's still more than doubling what you did last year. If the Canales stuff, I mean, like what he's said, like what he's done and what he said makes me concerned the more I've looked into some of the stuff. It's been results based, and you cannot argue against the results. Like, he resurrected Baker and Geno without a doubt and got more out of Russ than we had seen for a couple like post injury seasons in like Russ's final years in Seattle. But like the established stuff, we want to dominate time of possession. They were a terrible rushing offense last year, and they just continued to run over and over again into loaded boxes with a poor offensive line with a like not difference maker at running back. So yeah, I think under 5.5 is where I would go.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I was eyeing back to the Bucs real quick. I was eyeing some Rashad White unders, but just because they were so bad at running the ball. I mean, it averaged like 3.5 yards per carry, but they just fed him. I mean, like 270 carries, and he barely got to 800 yards. I mean, he was like 840, something like 850. So I don't know. I think that could be an interesting look too, to be honest, just because they got Bucky Irving now. They got like other guys. I mean, but he's not really like a workhorse guy either. He's kind of like a pass catching guy. They have Chase Edmonds, who fuck Chase Edmonds. I mean, he totally fucked me. I mean, I put all my eggs in that little bastard's,
I liked him too. I mean, I didn't go as heavy as you did. You went heavy, but I liked him too. So I'm not going to let you die in that alone. Like,
yeah, I was just kept buying. Like, it was like,
yeah, you were in
9th round, 8th round, 7th round. I was like, fuck it, 6th round. I was like, you know what? I'm still in. I'm all the way to the moon. And the thought process was right because I think most are crushed. But yeah, it's tough scenes.
Again, the schedule is light. Like they could get off to a decent start with the schedule, and I don't know. It's just I just don't buy it. I think it's a team that's a little bit worse on the defensive side, and that helped him quite a bit. And I just don't think the strides on offense have been enough. So 5.5. under would be the way would I go. What would be your best bet currently? Because I think we both, the more we talk through this, are aligned with a lot of stuff. I think there are opportunities here, but probably like not preseason opportunities. There are some like selective market entry points, like maybe towards the tail end of maybe week 4, week 5, depending on where you think of these teams.
Yeah, just like summarize, I think some of our favorite looks. Yeah, like betting on the Saints. I mean, week 5-ish, week 6. Betting on the Falcons week 4, maybe to win the division. I think Bucks under is interesting, especially at 8.5 wins. If you don't mind tying up money and in a vacuum, if you have an unlimited bankroll, like I think -155 under 8.5, pretty high EV there, I think. And then Panthers under 5.5. I think you like it a little bit more than I do, but I think it's still a good look, especially at plus money.
Yeah, I completely agree with those. I think, Bucks under, Panthers under, and then depending on the price and depending on what happens in the first month with some of the schedule stuff, I think you can get a nice enough. If you get the Saints up to 5-1 or so to win the division, like that could be of interest. Offensive line's so bad though, but if Kirk comes in and looks like Kirk, they get off to a slower start, maybe you can get, a decent number on Falcons. Like I said, plus money on something on the Falcons to win the division is probably the safer bet, because I do think just overall talent in terms of what they're starting the season with and their starting roster, because I do have concerns about the depth in Atlanta. They're the best team on paper and probably have the best shot of it too. So it's probably the best way to attack the South here. So not an overwhelmingly exciting division, and I don't think any of these teams are contenders. Like the best shot is the Falcons. They have to run hotter than the sun and stay incredibly healthy, and that's kind of the only path.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think you said it well. Like the Falcons, whatever team wins this division is probably going to play one game and be a one and done in the playoffs. I mean, they all just have too many flaws. Like it would take basically our preseason notions being very wrong about one of their units, which is again always possible. We saw with the Bucks last year, but it would take a lot for any of these teams to be like, I think, really, really good.
Yep. All right. Wraps up the South. Again, you can go back 4 for 4 bets on YouTube, Move the Line podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want to check out our preview last week of the NFC East, and stay with us, subscribe to both the YouTube channel and the podcast feed if you want to continue with us. I'm going to ride this out and do this, give you our best bets and team breakdowns for every division leading up to the season. You want to get all the official plays and all the things that we have going on at 4 for 4. You want to get the betting subscription, 4for4.com/plans. Get in the Discord, get access to us, tag us, chat. We chat with everyone in there, access to us at all times. We do our best to be available for our community. It's kind of the best part of what we get to do with this job. Absolutely love it. And again, if you are still grinding season long, you're playing best ball, anything you can do, the betting sub gets you access to everything at 4 for 4. So rankings, all that stuff, projections, any of those articles, tools. We've got an incredible suite of tools and some exciting stuff that we're going to have, and more announcements in terms of other contributors and people that are going to be hanging out with this season too, right?
Yeah, no, we got, we already got our guy Steven Hoops on board to do some interception props.
Yep, like it.
We kind of announced him. He is an interception model. We just added Hunter Huss, HL Huss. He's been like a long-term winning bettor on sides and totals. So, I mean, it's like the hardest market in sports to beat. So I'm super excited for that. And he's already releasing futures in our Discord. And we got 2 more announcements coming up for the betting sub, probably in the next couple of weeks, that we'll start ripping off. So exciting times.
Love it. All right. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe before you take off. And we'll be here next week to keep the NFC moving along. So for Connor, I'm Ryan. We'll see y'all next time. Thanks, everybody.